4-time world champion in the shot put, 4-time world indoor champion, gold at the 2008 Olympics, gold at the 2012 Olympics, silver at the 2016 Olympics, bronze at the 2020 Olympics, World Championships record, World Indoor Championships record, Commonwealth Games record. Between August 2010 and July 2015, she won 56 elite level competitions in a row, so was unbeaten in the world for almost 5 years, was the IAAF World Athlete of the Year in 2014, and in 2017 was named a Dame Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to athletics. Please welcome Dame Valerie Adams. That is a long list.
And that's a wrap. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
That is our time. If you go all the way back to the beginning, before you even knew what shot put was, to you, as a girl in the 90s, what did you think your life or your options were before you realised you had this sort of path with athletics?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's so awesome to see you all here today at the Cloud. For me, to be honest, back in the 90s, I grew up, I was 6'4" at the age of 12, so this height at the age of 12. Imagine being at school, being the tallest kid at school, taller than your parents, taller than the teachers, taller than everybody else, even the principal. That was quite a hard life to kind of juggle. So did I have any hopes and dreams about doing anything in particular as I was growing up? Absolutely not. I'm also from South Auckland, from Mangere, with not a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot of cash growing up, so therefore limitations to opportunities were pretty much set for us. So for us, it was go to school and have no lunch, come home, do some chores, and just hang out. For me, my light came through a school athletics day where I broke the school record by a few metres, and also the PE teacher taking some pity on me. Now, I've got size 14 feet, had size 14 at the age of 12, and therefore I didn't have any shoes. And my PE teacher graciously bought me my first pair of Nike shoes after 6 months of even doing some type of sport. To be able to do athletics, she gave me some hope and light. But what the biggest breaking point for me was losing my mum when I was 15 years old and making a decision of what I was going to do in life. And on the 16th of September, she passed away, but on the 15th of September was the opening ceremony for the Sydney Olympic Games, which I happily watched right next to her bed at the South Auckland Hospice. So that was basically where the dream was born and where my journey started.
And you talk about being 6'4" as a 12-year-old. Obviously, there's all sorts of things around what, you want to be beautiful, you want to be popular, you want to be all these things. At what point did you start to see being your height and having your strength as a real positive, as like, actually, this is an advantage for you?
Obviously, I wasn't very popular. I was bullied a lot at school by kids because I was so tall. I was called Bigfoot, Amazon, Giant, you name it, every name under the sun. And it was quite hurtful, very, very hurtful. So to have to deal with that. The other thing that made it harder for me was the fact that I didn't grow up with my mum. My parents split up, so I didn't grow up with my dad. My dad was the tall person in the family. So there was nobody in my likeness to look at and be like, oh, I'm tall because my dad's tall. That was just what some of the struggles I had to go through. But for me, really embracing who I was and my height it all came like 100% to its fullness in 2004 when I kind of qualified for my first Olympic Games, and then I really embraced who I was. The only time before that I embraced who I was and my height and all the rest of it was on the sporting field because everybody wanted to be in my team because I was awesome. That is why. But before that, I never went to a school ball. I never attended any socials or anything like that because I just didn't fit the mold. And it's sad that I had to go through that and subject myself to not fitting in. And if I was to change that today, I would hope that I'll be more confident with who I am, especially now because I have a child and I have a daughter, and she will most likely be tall, and that's okay.
You do shot put, which is like very intensive, very explosive, a lot of weights. There's a lot of pressure on your body. When you started getting your period and you're dealing with a period, and people now talk about training with your period rather than through it, how was that in terms of your coaches and who you worked with, and how did you navigate this basically time of the month in terms of trying to have these real intensive training periods?
That's an interesting subject, and it's really only just come to light today. When I started athletics, it was basically you get that, you basically just carry on. Nobody knew what was happening. I just dealt with it and carried on. You take some Panadol, ibuprofen, you just deal with it. Other females who have their menstrual cycle obviously suffer from it even worse than others, right? So we have to take that into consideration. One of the funniest experiences for me was actually being trained by a male. So Jean-Pierre Egger, who's actually 80 today, my coach from Switzerland, was with him for over 8 years. I had to explain to him in a very delicate way, because he was a few years older than me, that, hey, every month a female gets something, and sometimes they feel a little bit sluggish or tired, or they're craving something, or they have some cramps. And he's like, oh yes, I lived with 3 females. I totally understand. So that was wonderful. But basically, nowadays, they do take into consideration menstrual cycle. But the issue to that, though, is that the competition is not going to be to your menstrual cycle. You've got to fit your menstrual cycle into the competition. But there are some days that you just have to compete with your menstrual cycle, and that's just the way it is, right? I've managed over the years, and to take it further, when I had Kimwana, my first baby, 6 months after that, I went to the Commonwealth Games after having her, and I was breastfeeding at the time. And what they did was they collected some of my breast milk because I was taking creatine, and they wanted to see if the creatine was going through the breast milk out, because it was a bit of a research experiment for them to see, what are the impacts of taking creatine and protein, etc. But what does this look like in the future for other athletes who want to breastfeed their children, but also need to take creatine for training, and how does that all work? And it's something that's more open in conversations now. And a male that takes the time to understand, we're really grateful for that. Some people some males don't have the ability to take the time to understand. But in the scheme of things, it's about acknowledging that it is there, but also for us girls, don't use it as an excuse. Like, if you can carry on as well, because it's a kind of a double-edged sword if you're not careful. But I'm a tough one. I'm one of these tough ones where back in my day it was take a concrete pill, tough it up, and carry on. And it worked really well for me, as you can tell.
I mean, concrete pill, some are bigger than others. You talk about you've had injuries, you've had surgeries. You were at the top of the game for about 2 decades. Mm-hmm. So how did those injuries and your approach to recovering from them, did that help when it came to having children and essentially recovering from having children in order to compete again?
Yeah, well, obviously injuries is just part and parcel of what we do. I've had 8 operations, surgeries, sports related, and it's just what you got to deal with. It's part of life. So when I did make the decision to have children, the journey to even get there, again, is a female problem. That's why I encourage all female athletes out there that if having a child or having a family is something in the future that they really want, please get help or go get information and knowledge well and truly in advance. I didn't realize it was going to be difficult for me to have a child. Both my children were done via IVF. I thought I wasn't the problem, but in fact I was the problem. I had endometriosis. Again, another issue that females got to go through, but it's one of those things that knowledge is power. When I decided to embark on having my first child, Kimwana, I also knew at the back of my mind that this silly woman wanted to go to the Commonwealth Games. Yes, I did. And I knew that the time was kind of tight. She was arriving in October via C-section, and then 6 months later, I was going to be at the Commonwealth Games. So between October and March, I needed to qualify for the Commonwealth Games and then turn up to the Commonwealth Games ready to win a medal. For those of you who don't know how I really am, I'm not a numbers person. I don't turn up to a championship just to be a numbers. I don't want to just be a participant. I want to go there and be a competitor. I want to go there and bring medals home for this country. That's just how I'm built and how I'm wired. So I knew full well, and yes, the surgeon tells you, don't do anything for 6 weeks. You've got to be very careful. Don't lift anything heavy apart from your baby. And I was like, yes, sir. Yep. Cool. So immediately after leaving the hospital, I went home, and then about 10 days later, I actually had an Olympic bar at home. I started lifting the Olympic bar slowly, and then I went on from there to adding a little bit more weights just at home privately. And then I ended up in the gym about 3 weeks later, and then started throwing about 4 to 5 weeks later. So each person is different and they're built differently, so you must work with your body. My body's quite used to training vigorously. My body's very used to being pushed to its limits. What the doctor doesn't know won't kill him, but it obviously worked in my favor. I was able to go to the Commonwealth Games, and I was able to come home with a silver medal in one hand and a baby in the other hand, which was the most joyous day of my life.
When you talk about pushing your body and your body being used to that, was there any part of you that had a child and then went, you know what, actually, this is fine. Maybe I just stay home today and look after the baby?
Oh, hell no. Oh, absolutely not. Once I put my mind to something and I have a plan in place, and I trust and I have confidence in myself and my belief that I'm going to be able to take this on, I jump on that journey and I run. That's why, being an athlete is hard. Winning medals is even harder. So I was committed to this journey, but also the people in my team and who were around me, my support network, knew and understood what the assignment was. And I'll explain to you the bus terminology a little bit. So I am the driver of my bus. Imagine you driving a bus. This bus is going towards the Commonwealth Games. In the bus is people who are going to add value to the bus to make it progress forward. So in the bus, I had myself, S&C coaches, nutritionists, management, childcare, you name it, they were on the bus. Everybody who was on the bus added value and needed to make the bus progress, right? Anytime I saw that nobody was adding value to the bus or making it progress, but holding it, like stopping it or pulling it back, I'd kick them off my bus. And you guys have got to do the same thing in life. There are some people who come into your life for a reason, but they also need to understand the assignment. Luckily for me, everybody in my team understood the assignment, but they also understood that the route to the Commonwealth Games is going to be slightly bumpy, slightly different, and we're just going to have to roll with it. But because I was so confident as the driver and I was empowered by my previous experience, I was able to kick people on and off the bus as I needed. But we eventually arrived at the destination. We eventually competed at the Commonwealth Games, and we came home and we were successful. So as much as the journey was very difficult physically, emotionally and mentally, I knew I had it down packed and I was ready to rock and roll. But I must say that the experience I'd had prior to that particular moment really worked in my favor.
And then you had a second child.
And
and you talk about when you won bronze at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, and you talk about how that felt the same as winning gold.
Yeah.
Is that because of how hard it was to get there, or just where you were in your life? Because I know you're a competitor, and I feel like if Valerie said winning bronze was like the same as winning gold, I would not believe them.
Yep.
So can you explain sort of how your thinking got to that
Got through,
point?
yeah. So when I embarked on having my second child, you got to remember this is my 5th Olympic Games I'm going for. I was 36 at the time, so a lot older than most of my competitors. Most of my competitors were 10 years younger than me. I knew experience-wise I had it, but I wasn't prepared, or I wasn't ready for what was about to hit me when I had my child. He was 5 weeks premature. I ended up in hospital because I thought I had contractions and Braxton Hicks and all the rest of it, but I didn't. What happened was the obstetrician decided to take my son out because he didn't pretty much know what was going on, but they thought they'll take him out because it's safer to do that. Very grateful for that day. But what ended up happening was that 3 days later, I had a twisted bowel and nearly lost my life. So they cut me open to have a C-section. 3 days later, they cut me down the middle. Emergency, and it was quite horrific. It was a very traumatic situation for me. But they cut me down the middle and saw that I had twisted bowel. If 2 hours later, I would have carked it. I didn't realize how bad it was. I woke up from the surgery to a bit of a nightmare horror story of having airway clogged up, tubes coming out of everywhere, and then realizing I also had something called a stoma. Nobody knew about this until after the Olympics because it was a very mentally tough situation for me, but I had a stoma. So basically, I had this and I had to stay. I stayed behind closed doors for a very long time. I became an introvert because all of a sudden I lost confidence in who I was, and I was very scared about what was happening to me physically. 4 months after that, I went back and they reversed the stoma. And whilst I was going through this journey, stupidly enough, Valerie still had at the back of my mind going, we're going to go to Tokyo, we're going to go to Tokyo, we're going to go to Tokyo. 10 months after I had my baby, I'd qualified for Tokyo. And this is after having 3 major surgeries, down the bottom for the C-section, twice down the front for the stoma, and then I qualified for the Olympics. So that was great. And quite a horrific journey to get there, but we got there because Valerie, as silly and crazy as I am, I was willing and wanting to take this on. What was the saving grace for me was, A, the Olympics were delayed by a year. Was it a good decision or a bad decision? I don't know, but it worked. It was a blessing in disguise because then I was thinking to myself, damn it, another year I've got to hold on as an older athlete. And then secondly, it was like, actually, it'll give me more time. But the blessing in disguise for me was July the 19th, the original plan was to be in Switzerland, training camp, prepare for the Olympics, and then go over to the Olympics. July the 19th, our lives changed forever. My son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and this was all happened in New Zealand at home, and it would have been in the middle of the Olympic Games. So I am very grateful that it was delayed for 2 reasons. The fact that I had a year more to train, but also the fact that we were home here in New Zealand when he was diagnosed. So as a mother, absolutely wonderful. As an athlete, it was painful. But we got there and we won the bronze medal, and that's the reason why the bronze medal meant so much, because all of a sudden I was there as a mother of 2 with a bronze medal in one hand and my photo of my babies in the other, and knowing for a while that I have lived my true life and I did what I wanted to do, but I also achieved something that seemed so impossible. Because I want to be able to look back and have no regrets. I've been in the sport for such a long time, 5 Olympics, over 22, 23 years in the sport at such a high level. I didn't want anybody else to dictate when I was going to retire from the sport, which happens a lot, especially if you're a female and having children. All of a sudden they put you on, oh, we'll see about that because you've just had a child. No, don't see about it. This is what we're going to do. So I went in there demanding what I needed and what I wanted. I didn't have John over here telling me I wasn't going to go there because, honey, we're going to shut you down real quick.
You then, bronze at the Olympics. Lots of people work their entire career just to go to the Olympics, let alone medal, let alone got multiple medals. I feel like if you wanted to, you could have gone to another Olympics. Like, you were qualifying reasonably comfortably and maybe not staying at the gold.
Yeah.
But what makes you go, actually, I don't need to go again?
When you know. As I mentioned before, I'm not a numbers person. I could have. And a year after the Olympic Games, I went to the World Championships in Eugene, and someone asked me if I was competing. I was not retired for about 6 months at this stage, and they asked me if I was competing. I said, no, I'm coming to watch a women's shot put, which was on at the time. And yes, I could have carried on. But then you sit back and go, well, actually, I've filled my cup. I've done my job. Physically, I was pretty much done. I've got a back of a 65, probably 7-year-old woman now. I've got 3 bulging discs and 4 compressed vertebrae. It's just part and parcel of doing what we do. But you can't do this forever physically. Mentally, I probably still had it, but physically, I was pretty much tapped. And the time was right for me. The time was right for where I was in my life, and it's worked out well. Now, the hardest things for a lot of athletes who do retire is what happens after retirement. If they don't have a plan in place, if they don't have anything to go to or things to do, that's when it becomes a little bit difficult. Don't get me wrong, I'm still adjusting to this new retired life, and the funniest thing is that people's assumption is that you're going out every day having lunches with your mates. I wish I was. I really wish I was, but that is not the case, because ultimately you still have a duty to make a living for you and your family and all the rest of it. But I made the right call at the right time. I have no regrets. I do not miss it. I don't not hate it, but I do not miss it at all. I haven't picked up a shot put, but I did have a little tutu the other day and asked people if they wanted me to, if I should do masters or not. So watch this space. I might come back.
Now that you've quote unquote retired, you've moved into coaching. You coach your sister Lisa, who was also a champion shot putter.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
We're from the same family. I mean, it was pretty. Yeah, I coach Lisa. It's been about 4 years now, and Lisa's a late bloomer. She's come into sport quite late. Lisa, for those of you who don't know, she won the Paralympics in the F37 class in Tokyo, and she just won the World Championships a couple of weeks ago. So F37, she's got cerebral palsy on her left side, and you know, athletes with physical disability, there are so many opportunities here in this country. And I love training Lisa. Why? Because she has my mentality. Obviously, we come from the same man, but she's awesome. She trains really hard. She's very determined. She knows her path. She knows her way. And for me, in another way, she's a great advocate for athletes with disability, especially within our Pacifica region. We're both born in Rotorua. We have a love and passion for the sport, but we lived together when she's in Auckland. It's been 4 years, and we have never had an argument, hands down. She is my sister, and I know it sounds really random and rare, but we haven't actually had a barney. And for her and us and that coaching relationship, when we're at training, totally coach athlete, but outside of training, I'm just a big sister. And I think that's where and how and why the relationship works so well. It's because we just understand each other, we understand the assignment, but we also have a lot of respect for each other. She's also a mum, so she understands my struggle, and I understand her because her struggles as well. So we share childcare, we do a lot of things together, but I'm looking forward and really excited to what the future holds for Lisa.
This is obviously an event for a Women's World Cup tournament. We had the Rugby World Cup last year, which is very popular. This has been very popular. Do you see a kind of a new future, even for, like, track and field is quite a small sport as far as public awareness and public buy-in. Do you see all of this turning into almost a new generation of female athletes and commercialization and people really getting behind it?
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that we have come a long way. Like, this is not just let's do it now. We actually have come a long way in society, in sports. Athletics, yes, you're right. There wasn't a lot of females. It was a very small sport. It was only a lot of middle-aged, middle distance runners. You know, that was the sport of track and field, where nowadays you have a lot more athletes participating, a lot more Polynesian and Māori athletes participating, which is fantastic. It's also out in Bruce Pullman Park, so it becomes a little bit more easier to get to if you need to get to the venue. But in general, worldwide, this movement of women in sport and make sure there are ample opportunities for them to get involved is growing. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done in this space, and this is where these types of events are important and pretty amazing to be a part of, but we have come a long way, so we must acknowledge that. Still a lot of work to be done, but we just have to carry on with what the Black Ferns did last year was absolutely phenomenal. We have the opportunity to have the FIFA World Cup here this year. We just hope to continue that momentum, but it's up to us to make a difference. It's up to us to stand up and be that leader, really, to carry these girls. Because at the end of the day, you females, you young, beautiful wahines here, you guys are the future of this country. So we got to make sure we give you guys every opportunity that we can to do that. It wasn't as easy for me as a young female growing up, but we want to make it easier for you. And I want to make it easier for my daughter.
Please give another warm hand for Dame Valerie Adams. Thank you.
Thank you.